chair? Do I have real chair responsibilities, guys? Uh-oh. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, indeed. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, this is a panel, I'm sorry, on career preparation and career trajectories of Africana women majoring in political science at HBCU colleges and universities. I think it's a great topic. Earlier, I tuned in on a panel where they were discussing the late Dr. Jewel Prestige, who was my mentor when I was in undergraduate school. And she was one of the first African Americans to get a PhD in political science. And she got her doctorate from the University of Iowa. Kathy knows her well. People who didn't get a chance to meet her certainly always heard about her because she was just that popular. And she gave a lot of advice to many students, encouraging us to go to graduate school, discouraging some of us from going to law school because I was like, I wanted to go to law school, and it was Dr. Prestige and my mother who discouraged that. And so I ended up, of course, going to graduate school. But in reading the paper, one of the papers that was submitted for this panel, it was just brought to my attention the critical role that folk like Dr. Prestige, Dr. Shelby Faye Lewis, and others, the critical roles that they played in serving as advisors to us, at HBCUs. I've been at a predominantly white university now for 32 years at Georgia Tech. And it just occurred to me, I was like, I don't do much advising. They have that, it's more an official role. Of course, the number of African-American students is not that great and is not consistent. We go, way down. We've been way down. Numbers are ticking up a little bit now. And so students see me in the classroom, but it's not clear to me how much of a role model I actually am being, particularly for undergraduate students. And so this panel and the paper really led me to think about that more. And so, and it raised for me the question of what I could do, and part of what I could do is just sort of, particularly here locally, I could, I'd be happy to come over to Spelman and give a talk to students or, that sort of thing. But anyway, let us move on to the assigned and active participants in this on this panel. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and decide what order in which you wish to participate. So Dorian, you want to lead us off?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dorian Brown Crosby, Associate Professor of Political Science at Spelman College, and I am co-presenting today with my student, who is also my research assistant, Cassandra Berice. And we will split our time. Dr. Persons, how long do we have? About 10 minutes each? I mean, total, 10, 15 total?
I suppose so. The panel runs from 4:15 to 5:15. I think that's what the program said, and that's what I wrote down here. Yeah.
Okay.
So we want, So we want to be mindful of that, and we want to, entertain any audience that we might have. leave a little time for that, at least 10, 15 minutes.
Absolutely, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
So I am going to share my screen.
Okay.
All right, can everyone see that now? Okay, so again, thank you all for this opportunity and also for attending our session today. As I said, my student and I are going to talk a little bit about what we started thinking about as a professor and a student, just in conversations about what was happening in our particular institution, but how maybe some of the things that we're talking about may actually be relevant to other institutions where we have Africana women students. So what we're looking at really is the analysis of the career preparation and trajectories of Africana women. And I chose the term Africana. I use it interchangeably with Black, but I just kind of like sticking close to the heritage part of the concept of Africana. And so we're looking at the career trajectories of Africana women majoring in political science at HBCUs. And the reason we decided to look at this topic is because there's very little research on HBCUs and career preparation. There's a lot of literature on HBCUs being the dominating producers of women in STEM fields, but there's very little research on the career preparation and planning of political science students at HBCUs, and even more so when we talk about women of African descent at HBCUs who are enrolled in the political science department. And another reason that this, just the idea of thinking about taking conversations into the research zone is because my colleagues and I received, as I'm sure many of you do, emails and updates from our students who have graduated, and they tell us what they're doing. They're in law school, they started their own nonprofit, or whatever they may have done beyond their collegiate experience is of course inspirational, and it's wonderful, and it's great for us to see that as professors. But what we found is that we don't necessarily in my institution have in the department a way to track our undergraduates who become our alumna. What are they doing? And that definitely can serve to circle back so that the alumni can come back as mentors, particularly in the department. And we know that right now, I was in the previous panel, that Black women really are at the forefront of politics, and especially in Georgia, where I'm from and where our institution is. And so there are a lot of reasons why we wanted to look at this topic, but also because of the noxious political environment that is a push factor for many students to HBCUs now, because across the board, we're seeing an increase in enrollment. And that has a lot to do also with the fact that HBCUs have always been connected to the communities and have always been a part of the solution and the protest and the contestations of all sorts of intersectional discriminations. So there are a lot of reasons, and primarily, as I said, because there's a lack of research on Africana women, political science students at HBCUs, but particularly those enrolled in HBCUs. And so I wrote and received a UNCF Career Pathways Initiative grant, which funded the research. And this also speaks to, again, why it's important, because even UNCF is realizing that we need to have more research on what college students at HBCUs are looking at in terms of their career preparation and their planning, and where are they getting the influences, what are the influences on those decisions, and how are they informing those decisions. And so if we're talking about Black women, and if we're talking about women of African descent, we certainly know that we have to have a Black feminist paradigm and structure. And so when we talk about the agency of African-American women or women of African descent, if we're talking about their career preparation, and I wrote down that Dr. Person said her mother discouraged her from going to law school. And when we talk about looking at career trajectories, with African American women and women of African descent at HBCUs, particularly at HBCUs for women, we realized that their lived experiences definitely inform their career decisions. Many students, as we know across the board in all campuses, may say, well, I want to go into law because that's what my father did, or that's what my grandfather did, or that's the family business, so to speak. But sometimes it gets lost in translation as to what the student actually wants to do. So all those things are not unique to a college advising session, but they definitely inform Black women's conversations when they're talking about what they want to do in terms of their careers, and also life experiences. What does that mean in terms of living your identity and being proud of your identity, but also knowing that society may reject your identity and may even try to discourage you from being a proud Black woman. And so these are all of the ingredients that go into the decisions that are somewhat unique to African American women and women of African descent, but more especially when they are at institutions that are built to surround them, nurture them, and help them, and to also talk about the opportunities for them to grow. And so that's where this research also branches out to, is an opportunity for me to bring in one of my students who is very much involved in research and is very much a part of this research and has been from the beginning. And so funny thought, when she first decided that she could actually help me and work with me, she put in on her own, in her signature on her email, research assistant to Dr. Dorian Brown Crosby. And I really took that as a compliment, because as advisors and as faculty and as Black women, it's really, really satisfying to know that other Black women, young Black women, see you and seek you out to be a mentor and for you to nurture them. And so it was really an honor for me to bring Cassandra into the research. And we have this is an IRB approved research. We went through all the procedures. She went through all of the ethics training. And so she really was the foundation of getting our data gathering and analysis together. And so I will pause here now and let her take over and talk to you about the methodology.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Berice. I'm a junior political science major at Spelman College, and I am very proud to be Dr. Crosby's research assistant for this research. So the beginning of our research was a little bit rocky. We had a lot of, pushback in a way on trying to figure out how to get our grant payments started effectively and efficiently without having any issues. But our research really entails mixed data. So it has a lot of qualitative data that came after reviewing our quantitative data, and a lot of interpretation that went into how we focused on our paper writing. But during that time, we began to vet multiple non-traditional ways to help conduct our research smoothly. The use of Qualtrics assisted us in being able to virtually and safely gain signatures and research consent forms that we had been trying to figure out what the best motive would be to do that in the very beginning. Learning the system was a little bit tricky, but once we worked that out, we curated emails that would be sent to the students to garner their participation. After that, we started testing the process of the links in January 2021. Through that, we were able to figure out whether or not students would be able to actively use the link to participate in the research. And then we worked through making sure that it was a smooth process from the link to the end of the survey. We did decide on a survey, and we used it because it was a much better way of collecting the research during the pandemic. At that time, it had just started and everything was a little confusing on how research would even be played out, in that sense of not being able to do it in the traditional way of a face-to-face conversation. Once the emails were sent out and curated, we sent out emails about every other day to make sure that the students were able to see it at the top part of their email and remind themselves to get it done, and also to make sure that it was never really missed. From that point, we started to meet more sporadically, me and Dr. Crosby, to discuss the data and also the results and interpret what we had based off of what was given to us. And then also to make sure we were considering all of the students that we needed to get information from that were part of the major. There was a lot that played into our methodology. But the next slide, please. Yes. So this is a chart of our participants. These is actually a chart of where they're from. And there were a lot of participants that we had from Georgia, which helped us sort of realize where most of the information was coming from when it came to what students were deciding and whether or not they were deciding to continue on a path either near or far from where they were already at. There were a lot of students that were maybe from the Midwest that we didn't get a lot of data from. However, most of our students were from Georgia, which, knowing that Georgia is a red state, it actually helped us realize that a lot of the participation was necessary, and all of the things that they wanted to do and where they wanted to go trajectory-wise was a lot more graduate school doing research instead of law school, which would help with where they wanted to be advocates for in their state. This is a chart of the students who were going to law school. Most students did want to go to law school. However, graduate school was the second response that we got from most of our students. And a lot of students that did choose law school had not applied yet. However, they were considering a lot of different options that would better help either decide law school later on for them, or even graduate school. Top schools were definitely in all of their options and their priorities and everything like that. Me and Dr. Crosby did talk about it later on. It was definitely an afterthought about how we may have had to have mentioned the medical field being a part of the career options that we could have placed for students to see if their political science career at Spelman would have either helped them later on in that field as well.
Okay, thank you, Cassandra. As you can see, she has a lot to talk about in terms of the methodology, and I'm going to move us along really quickly. So as she was saying, these are the top 3 careers. We also looked at, we had 57 seniors, 36 of them completed the survey in total. Some of them completed some questions and some did not. The surveys ran from April 5th to April 16th. And as you can see here, there were some departmental and some institutional ways for students to seek support about their career pathway discussions and decisions. And one of the other things that we thought about was, again, going back to Dr. Person's point earlier, which is really important, and that is, how does the community play a role in how Black women, college students enrolled in political science departments at HBCUs, particularly HBCUs for women, think about their career trajectories, and do they actually take advantage of their professors who are there to talk to them? And our research bears out that not as much, but that's also because most of the students are thinking about going to law school. So thank you all so much. We will stop there, and we look forward to questions in the conversation.
Well, thank you, both of you. I see a photo here of a gentleman. Are you present? Can we hear from you? Maybe not. Corey.
You may be,
Corey.
yeah, you may be seeing my photo, but I'm not on the panel. So.
Well,
Oh,
okay.
there, Tari Ajadi.
He says Corey Gooding.
Yes, I am here. I'm not on
Yeah.
the panel though. Just wanted to.
We'd
I'm
be
just
happy to
moderating.
hear from you.
Corey is the program chair.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so you sort of
Just
checking to see
moderating.
how things are going.
Yep, just
Yeah,
making sure the tech is good.
yeah, okay, that's great. And we have another young lady here, Dr. Elizabeth Walker. Dr. Walker,
Hi.
hi. Would you like
I
to,
can share my screen.
would you give us a few comments, perhaps?
Oh, okay, so I'll share my screen.
Aha.
Okay. So, my name is Dr. Elizabeth Walker, and I'm from College of the Desert. And my topic here is looking at the gentrification of the academy. So going back to just a quick overview of the history of California migration, California was always a free state. And so there were individual Blacks were beginning to migrate even from the earlier standpoint of before it became a state as a territory. And both Black and white people came to California to gain wealth from the gold rush. But the large number of Blacks began to start migrating to California during and after World War II. But there was still a large component of white Southerners. So with them came Jim Crow. So the population began to explode all around California, but with African Americans from the 1940s to the 1970s, it reached its highest of 17.9%. And so I'm really focusing on the city of Compton, and really Compton College is the focus of this case study. But the city of Compton, just to give an overview, before World War II, city of Compton was 95% white. During World War II, Blacks began to move to California. And then there was a decision, Shelley versus Kramer, that prevented racial allocation to restrict racial restrictions in purchasing houses. And so more Blacks were able to buy houses in the city of Compton. And by the 1960s, the Black population in the city of Compton became 65%. After the 1992 riot and to the present, Blacks have slowly decreased in their population. And there's two reasons. One, in the 90s, there was a low-income residents that were targeted to move to in the low-income housing developments, and were moved 66 miles away to buying homes in San Bernardino and Lancaster. And then second, there's an influx of Hispanics that moved into the area. Overall, we're looking at the California Master Plan because I'm focusing on a community college, and the California Master Plan, it has been updated about 4 years ago, but it was created in regards to the UC being the top tier institution and community college being the lowest of the tier. Now, so when we're thinking of Compton College at one point was dominant, white dominant, because it was founded attached to the Compton Community College District. But by the late 60s, it became more Black dominant. And by 2013, it was 37% Black to 49% Latino. And then by 2012, the demographic shift was considerable, where 66% Hispanic, 19% Black, and 1% white. This becomes important as we look at some of the reasons why Black students are leaving. And partly is because in 2008, there was a partnership of Compton College in order to maintain its accreditation. They merged with El Camino College, and El Camino College later began to start targeting Black students by giving them more services, and then also mandating that all Compton College students at one point would have to take a class in order to graduate at El Camino College. And so then there became this demographic shift as well within the vicinity of Compton, which contributed to Black students migrating from Compton College. Simultaneously, there's been a decline in Black faculty. And part of that is because they're retiring and they're not being hired. So the purpose of this study is to utilize this case study along with the historical analysis to be able to see how the faculty has been gentrified, and then to see how the faculty currently does not represent its student body's demographic. So looking at relevant literature, after the student movement in the HBCUs in the 1960s, Black faculty has largely taught at HBCUs. However, there is a movement in the 1970s, particularly, that more Black faculty teach at predominantly white institutions. California does not have an HBCU. Of course, we could talk about Charles Drew Medical School, which is the only HBCU, but it's very small. And so community colleges tend to be overrepresented of Black students. And Compton College being the highest percent of Black students within the state of California. Formerly Black majority cities have shifted due to immigration. So formerly Black cities are now predominantly Asian and Latino, and Compton College Compton City of Compton happens to be one of them. So this theoretical lens and methodology is looking at this white-oriented institution perpetuates whiteness. And then when looking at a historical aspect of what was happening to college students of this whitening of this campus, and it's looking at how a predominantly Black faculty moved towards white faculty, and this historical analysis explains how that shift began and happened and continues. So in 2018, which is not the most recent, but the next to most recent, and I'll show you the most recent in a second, is that administration continues to be the largest dominant in regards to African Americans, who they tend to have stayed. The most dominant group is your administration, and then it's your classified staff, and then it becomes this tenure track faculty. And over time, white faculty has went from a very small percent to now it has been the highest percent within the demographic here. So here are some of the findings, is that from 2008 to 2022, Black full-time faculty has diminished, and there's been a few reasons as to why it's diminished and why white full-time faculty has increased. Number one, the partnership with Compton College to El Camino College caused El Camino College administrators to come to Compton College, and they were and demoted their position to where they became Black administrators became directly reporting to white administrators, and including the Compton College president. And so there's this component where Compton College also had to, in order to regain their accreditation, they had to hire fewer Black faculty and had to hire more white faculty in order to diversify the faculty, even though that campus demographic did not mirror that faculty transition. Compton College also, they did gain their accreditation in 2017. I think that's important to note. El Camino College part-time faculty then began to be hired at Compton College for those full-time positions. Black tenured faculty began retiring. And then finally, most academic departments now have no Black full-time faculty at all, and thus hiring committees are mostly composed of white faculty. So the more recent is we're showing that there have been indicators of bias hiring practices after a study from USC Race and Equity came in to analyze the hiring practices that are taking place. And as one of the things that you may note is that, and that's why I played in red in the middle, is that the applicants here at the top shows the demographics of the type, the demographics of who's actually applying. And then at the bottom, you'll see who's actually being hired. There's a bit of a misconstrue here, and actually I believe that this was intentional because the board is beginning to ask questions about this discrepancy. And so there's an intentionality of combining part-time and faculty applications and hirings. So then it appears that it is not as inequitable as it actually is. So what are some of the reasons for the biased hiring practices? Listening to some of the evaluating the hiring committees, they base their hiring based on, or their analyzing of applications based on grades on transcripts, the caliber of school, if you went to an online institution or if you went to an in-person institution, PhD preference, even though PhD is not a requirement to teach, and emphasis on teaching experience when it is not in the job description, knowing candidate from another context. Now there's supposedly a blind hiring process when it comes to the entry point in order to have student faculty, potential faculty being able to be interviewed, but still knowing the candidate still becomes one of those components. Looking at the language, the grammar, sentence errors, and the cover letters, focus on expertise in teaching demo. And so this, listening to non-faculty, committee members. And then finally, the work experience in for-profit colleges or four-year institutions, those are negatives. So a Black faculty member who comes from a four-year institution, teaching at a four-year institution, going to a two-year institution, that's looked upon more of as a negative than a positive. And if they also teach at a for-profit, that's also looked as a negative. Finally, discussions. The administration is largely African-American, including the Black president who's been there for the last 11 years. The current Black president has created many programs to attract Black students, such as having a Men of Color program, having on-campus housing, creating summer study programs with Clark Atlanta University, having this at-home meal delivery program, hotspot loaning program, distributing laptop program, etc. But faculty leadership is now white or white Latino, and they have voted a no confidence vote in November 2021 against the president. They have been actively trying to relieve him of his position. And then Black students really do not see themselves in the classroom because they're not being taught as much. Full-time faculty are not, our Black faculty tends to be in more of your trade programs and not in the traditional liberal arts programs as well. There's been some curriculum changes. There's been establishment of the LGBTQ+ certificate, while also relinquishing is no longer offered the ethnic studies certificate. Some of these implications are that it continues to be, there's this disconnect between the student body and the faculty demographics. Campuses are struggling with enrollment currently because of COVID for many reasons, but Black students now have choices. So they are moving to campuses that may meet their needs. So there's no real large concentration, even though Compton still has the largest concentration of Black students. Full-time tenured faculty has really great control over at California community colleges. They influence the administration's decisions. They are influential in the hiring decisions of faculty. They are the ones who create curriculum and continuation of curriculum. And they also are the ones who are influential in maintaining accreditation. So some suggestions, of course, is to follow the USC's Equity and Race has evaluated that there is bias within the hiring. There has been implicit bias in racial trainings. However, the full-time faculty continues to have the same output of perpetually hiring white faculty in the more liberal arts disciplines. And the full-time faculty, really should not have as much power over faculty hiring practices, as the difference in the hiring committees when it comes to administration and staff roles is that they're diverse. But within the full-time faculty, because they are majority, have to sit on the hiring committees, it's not as diverse. And so thus it continues to perpetuate the hiring of lack of diversity. That is all. Thank you so much.
Very good, very good. It was great to hear and to see the kind of detailed analysis that you all have engaged in there. And it just reminds me and reminds all of us of the continuing struggle, actually. And one of the dominant practices in the academy, of course, is that faculty hire faculty. And for the most part, it's faculty who make who are in the primary role in terms of promotion and tenure decisions, although administrators, have to endorse those decisions. But the initiative, of course, comes from faculty. And so it's easy for certain biases to be perpetuated, because there's so much really just so much bias in the process, because faculty will look for their friends and buddies, and white folk tend not to know enough of us. They tend not to know enough Black folk, or they ignore us, and so they look out for each other. So white faculty, predominantly white faculty, making most of the decisions about hiring will lead to, of course, a perpetuation of a white faculty. I mean, that's what happens, and one sees it all too often. One sees it all over, and of course the tenure, the tradition of tenure, just sort of locks in those decisions, and it makes change very, very difficult. So that's an important, very important topic that you looked at, and looking at how the contextual demographics have changed in terms of the local surrounding communities, and how the university sort of sits there substantially in a position of resistance to those changing demographics. It's interesting, very interesting work that you're doing, and hopefully it will get a broad audience of people who will be informed about it. So you're to be greatly encouraged. you are greatly to be encouraged in your research. I was just sitting there saying, oh my, because it's the kind of documentation that you're doing where you can put the numbers in folks' faces. It's the kind of documentation and that sort of longitudinal element there, where you're looking at stuff across time, how the demographics are changing across time. That adds to the significance of your work, and it adds to the impact of it, to be sure, adds to the impact of it. It's interesting because at my place here at Georgia Tech, there's so many, the Atlanta is a kind of predominantly Black city, almost sometimes. The actual demographics are playing out. Actually, we had the experience of Black empowerment before we actually had quite a majority of the population. But a place like Georgia Tech is, in the minds of so many people, they think it's a private school. And it's not. It's part of the university system of Georgia. It's a state school. But since it had a predominantly technological orientation for so many years, and it's just been so white in terms of both its faculty as well as its student body. So people have just thought about it, says, oh yeah, that's a white school. So there are oft times, it's amazing. They're oft times surprised to know that no, it's not it's not a private school. And of course, the presence of the HBCUs here probably helped to contribute to that to some extent. And Emory, of course, has always been a kind of, a set aside. Nobody is sort of like closely connected to Emory except the people who work on the Emory campus. And so it's the dynamic surrounding Black colleges spans an interesting range. And but this element here that you're touching upon and you're looking at, and that is how the college changes within the context of the broader local demographic changes, and how the surrounding host community changes, and how the university, the college can remain in many, instances, or to a significant extent, just remain sort of immune to that, so to speak. So very good work, and greatly to be encouraged. Yeah, okay. So, do we have comments from anybody else in our audience? Okay. I'll give a little feedback on the first presentation there about the career choices and career preparations for students. One of the things I think is that I think students, I know in fact that in some places students are not getting very good career advice, but it seems that that is certainly not the case here. But the other thing about political science as a degree preparation, for example, I was sitting here thinking that maybe we need to advise students more about what are the possibilities for a political science major, for a political science degree, and how might we do that. And so when I was reading the paper originally, Dorian, I was thinking, I said, maybe we might add another semester, that is a much more, that we emphasize an applied dimension as a minor. That's a possibility, at least theoretically, where we expose students to the prospects of working, the prospects of a more public administration kind of orientation, for example. And there's sort of two main elements of that. One is government agencies, of course, where we're inundated with government agencies. And so the public administration thing would, work well there. That's what it was designed for, government agencies at the federal level, at the state level, as well as the local level. So there's that public administration aspect and angle there. And then there's the role of nonprofits, which could be a great applied minor kind of focus for students who are majoring in political science. Nonprofits, I'm predicting, will have a greater role in society as we go forward. They sort of, they probably were not doing so well before the COVID disruption, and the COVID disruption has undoubtedly hit them very hard. And so they'll be making a comeback, and many of them will take this opportunity to refocus and having a kind of infusion of sort of new blood, so to speak, with students who are coming out of HBCUs in particular, but not only HBCUs, with an applied sort of public administration minor focusing on nonprofits. That would be great, and certainly help. Certainly structuring the career advice and mentoring activities around some new orientations and new opportunities, I think would be a great thing. And here again, if we don't add a half year, we could, we could do a summer institute. If you can't do a summer institute, then just have an organized set of, have a program where you have an organized set of presentations, or, some kind of set aside functions where students could be exposed to different speakers or different presenters, both from the local college as well as from other colleges. Could be, folk could be invited in to play some role in that. It's no surprise that students who are majoring in political science or disproportionately interested in law school, that's been the case. Law school, the appeal of law school has sort of dampened down, it seems to me, over the last decade or so. Graduate school is always interesting and appealing, and perhaps we can do a better job of explaining to students what their options are when they go to graduate school, particularly, for example, with these applied minors, or, if somebody has a bachelor's degree, say, in political science, and then they pick up a master's in public administration. I think that would be a very interesting combination, and one that, would pay off, I'm sorry, going forward. I was surprised, but I felt good about it to see some mentioning about the students starting nonprofits, and I did my signature kind of thing, I was like, oh yeah, let's go. That would be good. And having curricula that helps to support those kind of aspirations, of course, would be good. How do you teach folk how to start nonprofits? And so that, could be a part of an applied minor, with the emphasis on nonprofit development as well as the management of nonprofit organizations. So it suggests to me strongly, the work that you're doing suggests to me that while we already have varying approaches to advising, we probably need to be more cautious and more conscientious about advising. While we already have varying levels of faculty involvement in advising, I think also we need to be more conscientious about that, and more purposeful and more focused. I was just thinking to myself, I said, gee, I don't do that much advising lately for some reason. And I was thinking, I said, I'm part of it as to how we've organized ourselves. And so there's one faculty member who is director of undergraduate studies, and he does most of that, you know. So he's a, you know, a white male, predominantly white student body, et cetera. But I'm wondering, you know, okay, so who's talking to our African-American students who might have different kinds of questions, different kinds of concerns, wanting to see somebody who, you know, who has trod the road that they are anticipating, you know, that they are thinking about. You know, most of my conversations with students are about their assignments and about their papers. You know, it's about the technical stuff relating to a specific course and not about, you know, where are you going from here, Angela? What are you going to do next? You know, kind of thing. And so I'm thinking to myself, I said, oh boy, maybe I just should stir up something, you know, informally. But because the guy, you know, the director of undergraduate studies, you know, being a white male, I mean, his life has been entirely different from mine. I mean, he didn't, you know, it's been an entirely different path. He graduated from Georgia Tech and then came back and joined the faculty. Boy, you know, okay. Gee. And so, you know, we usually leave home after our undergraduate experience. We go off to graduate school somewhere, and then we start on a career path and, you know, make a couple of moves or something before we really can find a place where we can stay long-term. So it's an entirely different kind of experiences. And so we need to bring different dimensions to the advising of African-American students, wherever they are. Whether predominantly Black HBCU settings, and absolutely on the campuses of predominantly white institutions. Yeah. And of course, this emphasis on STEM has been good and it has, you know, really, I think, been impactful over the last decade and a half, to be sure. But that just reminds us that there's work to be done yet. And again, you know, in regard to the social sciences and emphasizing the significance of the social sciences, particularly for African-American students. So that's about it. So I think we might, I guess I would sum it up by saying, I think we might need to change our approach. Here again, we need to do something different, you know, a summer institute, have more summer institutes. Certainly the internship routes is a great one. I must have done 2 or 3 internships when I was an undergraduate. And that was, you know, because of Dr. Jewel Preston, you know, my mentor, primarily her influence. But I like spent a summer at HUD. I did a semester in an internship on Capitol Hill. And then I did an internship, I think I did the Interior Department. And it was, all of that was, you know, very broadening kind of experiences. And oh, I'm delighted that I did those things. It just presented, you know, like whole new vistas to me as I was making my decision about what to do going forward. And on the earlier panel where we talked about Dr. Prestige, I mentioned to them that, yeah, she helped to encourage me to go to graduate school. She, along with my mom didn't want me to be a lawyer. I was insisting I wanted to go to law school, and she didn't want me to be a lawyer. She didn't say I couldn't do it or don't do it, but she was a preacher's daughter, and she said, the old lawyers just lie so much. So, was something as fundamental as that. But she was so proud of me, and my sisters before me, who went on off to college and did something, either 2 years in college, my oldest sister, and then me and my other sister did 4-year degree programs, and then I was the one who went off to graduate school to get a PhD. So from my small town in Alabama, Seal, Alabama, two of us, there are lots of people who've gone off to college. I went off to graduate school and got a PhD, and there's a white lady who went off to get a medical degree. And it was she who pointed out to me that she said, I think you and I are the top-notch strivers of how she characterized it from the small town. So certainly when we're talking about African-American students, we're also talking about students who come from a broad diversity in terms of backgrounds and preparations and role models and all of that. And so the advising element is very, very critical, and sharing the information about that. So you're greatly to be encouraged. Again, greatly to be encouraged.
So I just have a comment, if I may. I was just thinking about this, we're talking about advising students and African-American students at HBCUs in political science. And I was just thinking, a lot of these departments now are social science departments. And they may or may not have a full political science program. They may have a track. And I think it's even more important that some kind of outreach be done for those students to just, because their primary interest may be in political science.
Yes.
But, a number of those, the HBCU departments now have merged, and I don't know what you call them. We have one here.
Yeah.
And it's extremely difficult sometimes, more difficult, I think, to get the students interested in some kind, some of the practical kinds of experiences we want them to have, because their primary professors may not be political scientists. They may be historians. They may be sociologists. They may be criminologists. I don't know, everything.
Yeah.
So that's something, Dorian, if you were going to do this on a broader level, maybe something to think about. Look at,
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kathy, because this was really a surface analysis of the project. And that's why the data doesn't go as deep as we could, because we had 37 questions, I think, and each one of them could take off and down a mile on their own. And so it really is a way for us to just kind of get this helicopter view of what's going on. And then, as you said, Kathy, branch it out, and Dr. Persons to, maybe address what the students are telling us. And that was the other thing that was important that I put in the chat that was brought up, is that this is a cohort of students who are coming through during the pandemic. So they had to pivot to online learning. They had to, and their professors had to pivot to online teaching. And so everybody was trying to figure it out as we went along. And so some things could have gotten lost in translation, but also their life experiences are impacting those decisions. So I appreciate Dr. Persons when she said that perhaps those nonprofits will be much more open to students now, and the students may be even more open to it because they have experienced COVID, or their family members, or they had to work or continue working or increase work because of a family member that lost a job, or they had to take on their own employment, or they had to see about an ailing parent or family. So we have, in HBCUs, we know that there's a completely different approach to what happens behind or while the students. We're looking at the student and not so much all the time just the student as the academic person in our classroom. We're trying to be holistic in the approach. And so all of those things come into how they think about their careers. And so yes, that's why we're really grateful to the feedback from everyone, because it gives us an idea as to how we can begin to address some of the issues and to rethink how we advise. And then the other thing is, we know that as professors across the board, we're just so busy. So we may want to give all of our students all of our time, but we just don't have that time. And then sometimes, even on HBCU campuses, as Dr. Walker is talking about, just the change in demographics push those students into certain professors' offices because those professors look like them, or they think that they know from maybe the research or the teaching style that this professor is open to listening to me. And so then we become all things to the students, and then that takes a toll on us. And then so, you know, it's that whole Black woman, I'm strong, I can do it all, but then again, maybe I'm not. So, you know, all of that comes into play because the students need that kind of comfortable space on campus, even on HBCUs. We know that they need them at PWIs, but they even need them on HBCUs because HBCUs are moving further and further away from their, not all of them, but it appears to be that they're moving further from the mission and further from the community and the folks that they are supposed to embrace and take on and nurture and equip to go out and take on the world. And so students seek out those spaces where they think they can be heard and be seen. And that was one of the reasons why I appreciated Cassandra's insight on the research, because she was giving me what the students are talking about, what the students are saying, because we have a different view as their professors, but they have a different view for us as, you know, looking at us as their professors, but they can tell us best as to what's going on and what they need and how we can help them. Even though we have our institutional and administrative structure and things in place, they know what's working for them and what's not. And so I think this kind of pulled back some layers that helped us discover that there's some disconnect in some instances, but in other instances, there's a great connection. So I just wanted to say that, you know, we definitely appreciate the feedback. There was a lot in this project, in this research. And so we just kind of had to decide what we're going to talk about today because there was so much to talk about. So yes, that's why a lot of it doesn't go, you know, it's not a deep dive into it, but it was just a surface analysis of what's there. And then we can just, you know, as I said, maybe decide how we want to move from there. But Cassandra will be with it until the grant was for 2 years. So it ends in 2022. But Cassandra already knows that I have my hooks in her now. So, you know, it doesn't matter where she goes or what she does, she's still attached to this project.
I know that there are time limitations. I just wanted to throw 2 things really quickly. I just wanted to say thank you to all of the presenters for this really, really important work. I wanted to say in particular, thank you, Dr. Walker, for doing the contextual historical work. I'm at an institution in California, and I think that that's so important for sort of understanding how these institutions are changing. If in more time, I'd be really interested in hearing sort of what are the kinds of moves that are being made to counter the ways in which bias is shaping hiring practices at Compton and across institutions, community colleges in particular here in California, and to Cassandra and Dr. Crosby. One of the things that you know, I find is that when you talk to students about doing political science, sometimes they don't. They find passion in the work, but sometimes it's hard to communicate that even beyond the institution, right? So I think as political scientists, we've all had the experience of saying, "Oh, I do political science," and say, "Oh, so you're going to run for office, all right? You're a politician," and you're like, "No, that's not quite it," right? And being able to talk to folks about what it is that we do and the importance of that work and the different ways in which that might be applied, I think is really valuable because what often happens with my students is that they are receiving a push in some cases, like, okay, so what job are you getting, right? And then in the sort of conversation about what job are you getting, lawyer becomes the first thing that comes up, but it's not the only avenue, right? And being able to talk about the skills that you are developing in being a political science student becomes a valuable way to talking about all the other pathways that open up through this work. And so I just wanted to thank you all for your presentation today. It's been really, really powerful. Thank you.
Great. Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm just sitting here thinking that maybe we should think about in terms of how we organize majors, and maybe we should think about and departments, political science and public administration. And I hope Kathy is listening in her role as provost. She might be in a position to launch an experimental kind of merger in that regard. But if we brought political science and public administration together in the same department, and students then could make a choice about whether or not they want to concentrate in political science or they want to have a concentration in public administration. Those are, because there's some, to some extent, there's sort of like two sides of the same coin. Obviously, the public administration goes down a kind of narrow, much more a narrow path than does the sort of broad political science focus. But it would be worth it. I think the experiment, the experiment would, I think, be great. And certainly in terms of, I think it would be great in terms of enhancing career preparation and career information and advisement for students going forward. The world is changing, and significantly so right now, I think, I would say. Any other comments? Well, we have met the goal of our time. We've been here since 4:15. It is now 5:20. And we were scheduled to run from 4:15 to 5:15. So at least technically our time is up, and somebody might come by and check on us and charge us up for overtime. I'm kidding. It's also happy hour time. And so if we were meeting in person, then we could go and continue this conversation at the bar. And so here's to next year when we will hopefully meet in person, and we'll have great opportunities to continue our conversations at the bar.
Emmett and I we were talking about that yesterday at one of the, I think it was the No Student Left Behind panel conversation, and Emmett was saying, wow, at this point we would probably be having the bar conversation. So yeah.
See, there you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah. That's sometimes those are the best conversations, sometimes the best discussions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Persons. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Corey, for recording everything. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm delighted to have been asked to participate, and I'm glad that we were that the technology served us well, at least reasonably well. And so
yes. And thank you, Corey, for taking away the hosting, because I was like, how did this end up on I don't want this, because I'm just admit. I was like, this is not what I wanted to do.
No problem. Thank you for holding down the fort.
Yeah. We're all adapting, but we did it. I mean, right. What an adaptation, but we did it.
Right.
Yeah, and this is when you really appreciate the technology. I mean, it's times like these,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock when I trudge down the hallway and go to church via YouTube. And I said, oh, thank God for the technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Good
yeah.
afternoon. Watch us say good night, everyone. A good
Yes,
evening.
same to you, Cassandra. I hope this is one of many more ENCOPs for you.
Yes, thank you.
Take
It
care.
will be. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.